Hello. Today I'm going to be writing an expert advisor for what I call the classic MACD strategy. Now, before I get started, there are two things I should mention to you. First, this strategy is very similar to the strategy incorporated in the sample file that's supplied with MetaTrader. Here in the MetaTrader 4 editor, you can see MACD sample there. And if I switch to the MetaTrader 5 editor, it's under examples, MACD, and there's the MACD sample. So what I'm going to be writing today is very similar to that. The code is quite different, but the strategy itself is quite similar. So if you're just looking for a quick expert advisor, you might save some time by just going to these examples. The other thing I want to mention is that I will be using some classes that I wrote in the last video. Here they are under indicators, indicator base, indicator MA, and indicator MACD. I wrote those classes to simplify the differences between MetaTrader 4 and 5 by basically wrapping up a lot of the difference in indicator handling into these include files. So I'll be using those in today's tutorial, but I won't be going into any detail about how they work. So if you want to see how they work and get the code for them, I'll put a link in the description and on screen to the previous video where these are described. In today's video, I'll be covering MetaTrader 4 and 5. And these classes will help to simplify the difference between the two. Now to get started, I've already created the three files that I'll be using today. There's classicmacd.mq4, .mq5, and .mqh. And I've created these three files because in the mq4 file, that'll be the file that I'll compile for MetaTrader 4, and it will also contain any code that's specific to MetaTrader 4. The mq5 file will be the same for MT5, and it will only contain code that's specific to MetaTrader 5, and the MQH file will contain most of the code because most of it's going to be common between 4 and 5. Now here in the MQ4 file, I've just put the comment at the beginning, and here are the trading rules for this strategy. I'm only going to open a new trade if there are no other trades open, so there will be a test each time I'm prepared to open a trade to see if there are already trades open, and I'll simply exit if there are trades open. And that's going to be a simple matter of counting the trades that we have. The buy strategy, if the price is greater than the 200 EMA, and so I'll be testing the close price of the just closed candle. I'm only going to be trading once per bar for this strategy. The MACD must be less than 0, and that again is for bar number 1. The MACD crosses above its signal line, so that means that the MACD on bar 2 is below the signal for bar 2, and now the MACD for bar 1 has finished above the signal for bar 1. And then I'll be placing the stop loss at a nearest swing low, and the take profit will simply be a multiple of the stop loss. The sell strategy is just the opposite. Price below the 200 EMA, MACD above 0, MACD crossing below the signal line, stop loss at the nearest swing high, and take profit at the multiple of the stop loss. And the only close strategy for this will be based on the stop loss or take profit. And something else I'll mention before we go too far. The MetaTrader 4 MACD has one line and a histogram. If you look at some other platforms, it may have two lines and a histogram. So to explain the difference, the line on the MetaTrader 4 chart is the signal line, and that is the average of the MACD. The histogram is actually the MACD values on MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5. So this histogram is what would be the second line on other platforms. And then where other platforms show a histogram, it's actually showing the distance between the MACD value and the signal value. But that's just in case you're used to seeing two lines and a histogram. And here in MetaTrader, there is just the histogram and a line. Now back to the code. In MetaTrader 4, after I've written the trading strategy there, all I have are the standard property statements: copyright, link, version, and property strict for MetaTrader 4. And then I have the one include statement, hash include, classicmacd.mqh. That's this MQH file that will contain most of the code. For the MQ5 file, the same thing. I have the comment at the beginning. I've copied the same trading rules in here. Property statements, missing the property strict because that's not needed for MetaTrader 5. And then the same include statement of the classicmacd.mqh. In the MQ5 file, there is one piece of code that I have to insert, and that's to include the trade object. and I will be looking to move this into the modular code soon. But in MetaTrader 4, I'm going to be dealing with placing orders directly. In MetaTrader 5, it's much easier to use a class called ctrade, which is included in a trade.mqh file that's supplied with MetaTrader, and that wraps up the functions for opening and closing trades. So first I include that trade/trade.mqh, and this only exists in MetaTrader 5, and that's why I'm placing it in this MQ5 file. And then I just declare a variable of type ctrade. So ctrade is the class that's defined in this include file, and I just declare a variable that I'm calling trade. And that include file also brings in a second include file, which is called positioninfo.mqh. I don't need to include the position info file because this file brings it in, but it then means I have access to a class called cPositionInfo, and I'm declaring a variable called positionInfo, and this gives me access to information about positions. And so that code is specific for MQL5. And the beginnings of the classic MACD.mqh, this is where most of the logic will happen, just the copyright statements and the standard properties. And I've included property strict here because when this is compiled under MetaTrader 4, it will force the property strict in the include file, and when it's compiled under MetaTrader 5, this will have no impact. So the first thing I'm going to need is some inputs. These are the standard inputs I would normally have for a moving average, and we are using the 200 period EMA as a trend filter for this particular strategy. So I'm inputting the MA period, default to 200, the method defaults to mode EMA, and the applied price defaults to price close. So all we'll be using that for is to determine whether the current market price is above or below the EMA, and we're only trading in the direction of buy if the price is above the EMA and sell if the price is below the EMA. So next, the inputs for the MACD. And these are going to be the same inputs that you would have if you were simply setting up the MACD on the chart. And I've just left these as the default MACD values. Fast is 12, slow is 26, and signal is 9. And if you're not sure what those mean, the MACD shows the difference between two exponential moving averages. So the fast period sets a 12 period exponential moving average. The slow period is a 26 period exponential moving average. And then the MACD is actually the difference between these two moving averages. And the signal period, in this case 9, is the average of the MACD value for 9 periods. And then we're calculating all of that based on the close price. And now, as I said, we're setting the stop loss based on a swing high and low, and I'm going to be using a very simple algorithm for this. I'm simply looking for the highest high or the lowest low, depending whether I'm looking for high or low, in the past number of periods. And I'm going to set that using this swing lookback variable, which I'm defaulting to 20. So I'll be looking for a swing high or low that is the highest high or lowest low for the past 20 periods. There will be some adjustment to that, and you'll see that when we write the code. And now the take profit stop loss. As I said, the stop loss is going to be based on the swing high or low, and the take profit then is a multiple of the stop loss. And so I'm just going to default that to 1.25 times the stop loss, and that's where we'll set the take profit on the trades. And now just some general values, an order size, magic number, and a standard trade comment. I'm just defaulting the trade comment to the name of the file, so this is a double underscore file double underscore. and the magic number is whatever you choose to make it. I like to allow the end user to input the magic number. That way it's easier for them to avoid a clash, just in case there happens to be another expert advisor that wants to use the same magic number. And now, because this uses moving average and MACD, and the way these indicators are handled in MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 is different. So that's what I've encapsulated in those classes that I'm going to be including, and I have left the link so that you can find the earlier video that shows how those classes work. But this is where I'm going to bring the include files in so that I can use that MACD and the moving average. So first is my MA class, and this is in the file. I've put everything under the Orchard folder in the include files, and then I've created a folder under that called indicators, and this is the indicator MA, so that's the moving average include file. And then that include file defines a class called C indicator MA. So what I'm doing here is declaring a variable of type C indicator MA. I'm calling it MA. There's no pointer here, so this is a standard variable. It's not a pointer to an object, but it is an object. And these are the inputs to the constructor for that class: the symbol, the period, which I'm taking both from the current chart, and then my inputs for the moving average, period, method, and applied price. And that's all the information that I need to be able to calculate a moving average. And that one statement has now set up this variable, and I can simply use that to get values from any point in the moving average curve. And now I'm doing the same for the MACD. I have another file called indicator MACD. It declares a class called C indicator MACD, and I'm declaring a variable that I'm calling MACD. The inputs to that are the symbol, period, fast period, slow period, signal period, and the MACD applied price, all the standard inputs for a MACD. And then the event handler for the OnInit. And there is a difference between MetaTrader 4 and 5. So to handle that, I'm going to create a function that I'm calling VersionInit, and that will be different between MetaTrader 4 and 5. And I'll put the version 4 in the MQ4 file and the version 5 in the MQ5 file. And then I have the NewBar function, which is just there to tell me if a new bar has formed on the chart. And that NewBar function simply compares the last time it was called with the current time, or the current start time of the current bar. And I'm simply calling it once here in the OnInit section so that it doesn't pick up the very first bar where we're starting this expert advisor as being a new bar, because we may be starting halfway through the bar and I don't want to trade there. So I just call this once, and that basically says, that's it, this bar is no longer new, and it will wait until the next bar before it returns a true. And we'll see that function later. And then just return a net succeeded. Now let's go to the specific MQ4 and MQ5 files and look at this VersionInit function. So now the VersionInit for the MQ5 file. It handles the initialization that's specific to MQL5. And this is also a candidate, as I mentioned earlier, for this common toolbox. Because the only thing I need in here is to set the expert magic number for this trade variable. So the trade object doesn't have an argument for the magic number when placing trades. So the way to do that is to set it once for the class. So I'm calling this trade.setExpertMagicNumber function, passing in the input magic number. And that's all for the VersionInit in MQ5. And now the VersionInit function for MQ4. And there's nothing here. So if you're wondering why I have this function when there's nothing to do, it's because in this include file, I'm calling the function. And depending which of these two files I've compiled then, that function VersionInit must exist somewhere. So if I'm compiling for MetaTrader 4, I need the function so that I don't get a compiler error in here. So I just create that function and leave it blank. And now back to the MQH file. The next event handler is the onDinit. In previous videos you would have seen that here for MQL5 I released the indicators, but now because I've moved all of that code into that common toolbox, it's handled inside these classes and I don't need to do anything here. I could in fact leave out this onDinit function completely, but I thought I'd just put it there for documentation. And now the OnTick section, which handles most of the work. So first I have some conditions that determine whether I'm allowed to trade at all, and if I'm not, then I'll just exit early. These 4 lines check different aspects of whether you're allowed to trade. The first terminal info integer with the terminal trade allowed tests whether the auto trading is set at the terminal level. So this is the global setting for the overall terminal. The next MQL info integer, MQL trade allowed, that's a checkbox on the screen when you first load up the expert advisor. So each individual expert advisor also has an allow live trading checkbox. Then the account info integer, account trade expert. This determines if you are allowed to run an automated trade on this account. And finally, the account info integer, account trade allowed, just tests whether this account is allowed to trade at all. So the account may have been locked out for some reason. So you need to test all 4 of these to determine whether you can place a trade. And then finally the NewBar function. Now the reason I'm only trading on a NewBar, remember the condition here is that the MACD has crossed the signal line. If you try to execute that kind of logic on the currently open bar, on bar number 0, you will find very often that the cross happens, and then as the price moves around, it will cross back again, and you'll get multiple crosses inside bar number 0. And by the end of that bar 0, by the time it closes, there may not have been a cross at all. So if you're looking at indicators crossing as a signal to trade, you should generally be looking at bar number 1 and trading on the close of that bar. And since you don't know exactly when that bar is going to close, I typically trade at the beginning of the next bar. And now, as I said also, I'm only going to trade if I don't have any trades currently open. So I have this test, if trade count is greater than 0 return, I have to write a function called trade count, but it's a very simple function. It will just look at all the trades that are there and count the number that are open for this symbol and magic number. Now I'm calling that MA variable, which I set up at the beginning here, and that's the C indicator MA type. So the MA variable, and I'm asking it for get value. So that will just get the value for the moving average at bar number 1. And that's what I'm going to be using to test whether the price is above or below that moving average trend filter. So I'm going to be comparing that to the close price, and the close is just coming from the iClose function for the current symbol and period and bar number 1. So I'm comparing the close price for bar number 1 to the EMA for bar number 1. And now for the MACD and signal, I want 2 values. I want bars number 1 and 2 so that I can see if it's crossed. So I'm setting up an array for each of those, the MACD array and the signal array, and I'll pass those in as arguments to get both values back at the same time. So there's my call to get the MACD values. I'm calling MACD, which is this object that I created earlier, using the getArray function this time. And I'm saying that I want buffer number 0. So MACD, remember, has 2 values. It has the MACD value and the signal value. The MACD is value number 0. I want this to start at bar number 0 and I want 3 values. So I'll be getting back values for bars number 0, 1 and 2. Now I don't need bar number 0, but it's easy to get back, and I think it's easier to do this because then the values, or the index to the values in this array, are going to match the bar numbers. And that just fills those values into this MACD array. And this function also returns count, which tells me how many values it has put into this array. I've asked for 3, but just in case something goes wrong, it won't return a 3. This count will be some other number. So I need to test that to see that I was successful in getting those values. So I'm simply testing if count is less than 3, then I'm going to return. Then I do the same thing, MACD.getArray, this time for buffer number 1, which is the signal array. And I'm populating the signal array from that, but for the same index numbers, beginning at number 0 for 3 values. Now if the first call worked, I should receive 3 values back here, but just in case, it doesn't hurt to run that test again. Now I want to check to see if I should be trading. So the first test, if the close is greater than the moving average, which means that we're above the moving average and we're in a buying mode, and if MACD 1 is below 0, remember one of the trading rules is that we buy only if the MACD is below 0. So if MACD 1 is below 0, and if MACD 1 has crossed above the signal, so MACD 1 is greater than signal 1, and to have crossed above the signal, it means that the previous MACD was below, so MACD 2 is less than or equal to the signal, then we're in a buying mode. If that's the case, I call the open trade function, which is another function that I'll be writing in a minute, and I'm just passing in the order type buy, because all the other parameters that I need for placing the order are already in the inputs or built into the logic of the expert. And now the sell logic is just the opposite. Close is less than the moving average. MACD 1 is above 0. MACD 1 has gone below the signal. And MACD 2 was above or equal to the signal. And then I just call an open trade for a type sell. So that's the OnTick function that takes care of opening the trades, and will only open trades if this trade count has come back as 0. So I'll have one trade at a time open. So let's look at some of those little utility functions. The NewBar function. I'm declaring a static variable of type date time, which I'm calling previous time, and that's initialized to 0. Then I'm capturing another date time that I'm calling now, and that's the open time for the current bar 0. Bar 0 is the current bar. iTime gives the open time for that bar for the symbol and period. And because this prev time is static, it's only initialized the first time this function is called. Each time the function is called after that, it will still have the value that this variable had the last time the function exited. So now because that prev time has the value either 0 when we're initializing it, or the value that it had the last time we exited the function, I can compare that to now, and if they're the same, then I know we haven't created a new bar, and I just return false. If they're not the same, then I make them the same by assigning now to prev time and return true. And because I've assigned now to prev time, next time I call this, it will simply return false because they will be the same until another bar forms. And this is why I call this once at the beginning of the application, because by setting prev time to 0, this will return a true the first time it's called. But because we set this expert advisor in the middle of a bar, I don't want to trade in the middle of that bar, so I just call this once and that resets everything. The next function I want to look at is trade count. That is different between MetaTrader 4 and 5, so I'm going to place that in the MQ5 file and the MQ4 file. So let's begin with MetaTrader 5. I'm simply initializing a result to 0. I'm getting a count of the total number of positions using the positions total function. And then I'm counting backwards. That's just my typical habit. So for int I equals count minus 1, so this is the last element in the list of positions. As long as I is greater than or equal to 0, counting backwards using I minus minus. And then I'm using the position get ticket function, which will get the ticket number for position I in the list of tickets. And if that fails, it will return a value less than or equal to 0 as the ticket number, and then I can simply continue, which will loop back to the next iteration of this loop. If position get ticket was successful, then the information for that ticket's been loaded into memory, and now I can use that position info object. Remember, there's a include that I had here that brought in C position info, and I've declared a variable called position info, which is an object. And it has a method called symbol, which I can compare to the chart symbol, and a method called magic, which I can compare to the input magic number. And this is how I can check to see that that position is for this symbol and magic number for this expert. And if those match, then just result plus plus. And that's all there is to counting the number of trades for MetaTrader 5. Now let's go to the same logic in MetaTrader 4. Still initializing the result to 0. In this case though, count comes from the orders total function for MetaTrader 4. Still counting backwards, the same I equals count minus 1 using I minus minus. Here the order is selected using the order select function, and that returns a boolean, so I'm simply testing if not order select. And the arguments to order select are the position number, select by position, because there are two modes to this, and mode trades says that I'm looking at current trades, not history. And if this fails, then it will return false, so if not order select, then continue, which will loop back to the beginning of this loop. And for MetaTrader 4 to compare the symbol, there is an order symbol function and an order magic number function. And I compare those to the chart symbol and the input magic number. If they match, then just result plus plus. And then I return result. And now in the MACD.mqh file, I also have this open trade function. And much of that function is common between MQ5 and MQ4. There is just a little bit of difference in the actual way that trades are opened. So I'll show you how I'm handling that. So first the open trade function, and I'm passing in the type of trade to open. I need to determine my opening price, so I'm declaring a variable calling it price. If the type is buy, then I use symbol info double to get the ask price, because that's the price where I'll be opening buy trades. If it's not a buy, then it must be a sell, and I use symbol info double using the symbol bid, because the bid price is the price where I'll be opening sell trades. And then just good practice, I normalize double on that price using digits. So digits is a function that tells me how many digits are applicable to the current chart symbol. And now the stop loss, SL, I'm using normalized double on swing price. Swing price is another function that we'll write in a moment. So I'm passing in the type to the swing price, and this is going to find that swing high or swing low depending whether we're buying or selling. And again, digits for the normalized double function. And now the take profit, that's simply based on the stop loss. So price plus price minus stop loss multiplied by that input ratio. So price minus stop loss gives me the gap to the stop loss. I'm multiplying that by the input ratio and then adding that to the entry price, and that gives me the take profit price, and again I'm applying the normalized double around that. And now to handle the small difference between MetaTrader 4 and 5, I've created yet another function that I'm calling version open trade, and I'll put that in a moment inside the MQ5 or the MQ4 file. But all that needs the type, the price, the stop loss, and the take profit. And that function will return a boolean, so I have if not version open trade. Then I'm just going to print an error message using the print format. Error, error number, placing order type, and the order type. You can embellish this more if you like, but that was a simple error message. So this will print the last error that we had and the type of the trade that I'm trying to place. And that's the open trade function. So let's just look at the version open trade while we're here and see the difference between the MQ5 and MQ4. First in MQ5, first the function, version open trade, and the arguments to this have to be the same for the MQ4 and MQ5 because it has a single call from that MQH file, so it needs to be calling the same type of function depending whether we're compiling under 4 or 5. So for MQ5 I'm using the trade object, calling the position open method, the chart symbol, the type of trade, whether it's a buy or a sell, the input order size, the price, stop loss and take profit that we calculated, and the trade comment. And the magic number has been set earlier on that trade object. And that's all for the open trade for MQ5. Let's look at MQ4. So same function arguments, type, price, stop loss and take profit. In MetaTrader 4, I call the order send function. Similar arguments, the symbol, the type, order size, price, slippage, which I'm setting to 0 here, stop loss, take profit, trade comment. The order send does have a magic number argument. And order send then returns a ticket number rather than a boolean. And if order send has been unsuccessful, it will return a ticket number that's 0 or less. So I'm testing here greater than 0. So what I'm saying here is I'm going to return that order send returned a value greater than 0. So that's how I return the boolean from this function. If I go back to MQ5, I simply returned the value coming back from trade.positionOpen, which is already a boolean. And that's the MetaTrader 4 version of Open Trade. And the last thing to look at in the MQH file is this swing price function. And this is where I'm going to be finding the most recent swing high or swing low. And the one argument to that is the type. So first I'm going to be capturing a bar number and a price. So for a buy type trade, I'm looking for the swing low because I'm setting the stop loss. So I'm using the iLowest function, passing in the chart symbol and period, mode low, which basically says I'm looking for the low price. So the iLowest is finding a particular price. So I'm looking at the lowest low. And the swing look back, remember, is the number of bars that I'm going to look back through, beginning at bar number 1. So I'm not looking at bar number 0. So where I set the default to this for 20, this is going to find the bar number that has the lowest low price in the last 20 bars. Now that just returns the bar number. That doesn't give me the low price. That's just the number. So then to get the actual low price from that bar, I just call the iLow function, passing the chart symbol, period, and the bar number that I got here. So this now gives me the lowest low price. But I want to take that a little further, because if the bar immediately before that happens to have a lower price, then this is obviously not a swing low. So I'm now going to compare this to the bar before that and keep comparing until I have a bar that's actually a higher low price than this. So while the price that I've just calculated for that lowest low inside this range, while that is greater than or equal to the low price for the next bar. And what I've done here, see this plus plus bar, you'll very often see something plus plus. If I had written bar plus plus, then it would be using the value of bar and then adding 1. By putting plus plus before the bar, it actually increments the value of bar before I use it. So bar is already pointing at the same bar that gave me this price. What I want to do is move it 1 bar further back. So plus plus bar moves it 1 back. So while the current price is greater than or equal to the price for the low price for the previous bar, then I simply update price with that low from the previous bar. And remember, bar has already been moved back 1 with this plus plus statement. So now price is pointing to the next bar. And then I'm just going to keep looping through this until I reach a point where the bar before is not a lower low price. And so that's for the order type buy. For the order type sell, I'm just going to be using highs instead of lows. So bar equals I highest and looking at mode high. Price equals the I high value. And here I'm testing while price is less than or equal to the I high of the previous bar. And then I return price. So that will find the most recent swing high or low depending on the type of trade. So I think that's everything. Let me go back to the MQ4, compile. That's everything there. Now I'm going to switch to the MetaTrader 5 editor so that I can compile the MQ5 version. So I have the MQ5 editor open and I'll just compile. And that also compiled without problems. And now I'll just switch to MetaTrader and run this in the backtest to show it operating. Now I've started the strategy tester. I have the MACD showing on screen and this line is the EMA. So I'll just let that run a little bit and then we can see the trades. Now I'll just pause it here. Here's a point where the MACD has crossed above the signal line and the price is above the exponential moving average. But by the time the MACD crossed above the signal line, the MACD is actually above 0. And remember, to buy, the MACD must be below 0. So I'll let that carry on. Another point here, the MACD has crossed below the signal line, but if I shrink this, the price is above the exponential moving average, so we should be in a buying mode. So crossing below the signal line while in a buying mode hasn't triggered a trade there. And here I was a little bit slow stopping the strategy tester, but the MACD crossed above the signal line. MACD is below 0. Price is above the exponential moving average. And at this point, we've opened a buy trade. The stop loss, don't know if you can see it, but it's just here, which is just below this lowest low of the recent trades, so just below the swing low. And take profit there is 1.25 times the distance to this stop loss. And we open the trade at the beginning of this bar. which is the first bar that opens after the MACD has gone above the signal. On this bar, the MACD is actually just a little bit below the signal. This is the bar where it actually moves above the signal, and at the beginning of the next bar is where we open the trade. So that's all for this Expert Advisor. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be looking at an alternative to ATRs that might be more applicable for intraday trading than the traditional ATR. So if you found this useful, then please click the like button. If you want to see that next video and any others, then subscribe, and if you click the bell icon, you'll actually be notified when we release a new video. So until the next time, thank you for watching.